Hi, and welcome back to this Friday edition of Focal Point AAFR Talk. Just finished my conversation with Dr. Greg Brannon, running for in the GOP primary. The primary election is on Tuesday in North Carolina. 888-589-8840, a number to call. Again, let's start this segment with some more Benghazi sound bites because this is critical stuff. Now, I want to go back. This is clip number 3, Rob. I want to go back to September 14, 2012. This is 3 days after the attack on the consulate. This is 3 days after they knew from their sources in the CIA and they knew from the military that this was a terrorist attack, that there was no protest of a video. There was no video that was involved in this whatsoever. They knew the truth. They had been told the truth, and now it's finally coming to light where they can't even deny it. But I want you to listen to Jay Carney, September 14, 2012.
But Gingrich was doing different things.
Jake, let's be clear. These protests were in reaction to a video that had spread to the region.
At Benghazi?
We certainly don't know. We don't know otherwise. We have no information to suggest that it was a pre-planned attack.
As Nancy Pelosi would say,
Benghazi, Benghazi, Benghazi. Why aren't we talking about something else?
Well, here's a reason. Clip number 4. This is Ed Henry. This is yesterday. Again, this email has come out. Ben Rhodes providing the talking points for Susan Rice. We know the video didn't have anything to do with it, but we've got to protect Barack Obama. The election is in less than 2 months. We can't do anything that would make him look bad, so we've got to find somebody to blame other than our own incompetence and other than our own failure to provide adequate security for this diplomatic compound. So they had to lay it off on this video. This is Ben Rhodes. He invented it. He's a fiction writer. That's what he studied in school. He writes fiction. That's what he did for a living. So he's used to this. He's used to making stuff up and passing it off as something believable. So Ed Henry now is asking him a question. We showed you the clip, for those of you watching, that showed the excerpt from the email that was submitted in response to the Freedom of Information Act request. That this email was about Benghazi. You can look at it right here. It's under the heading Benghazi. And yet Jay Carney's out there saying, no. This email didn't have anything to do with Benghazi. It was about the larger efforts, the larger unrest in the region. So Ed Henry starts pressing him on this lie that this email was not about Benghazi. Let's listen.
Ed, it's your turn.
If the email was not about Benghazi, as you said yesterday and you say again today, why did the White House turn it over to a conservative group seeking information about Benghazi?
You would have to ask the State Department about how they responded to FOIA requests. I would, again, point you to the fact that, all you have to do is read it, Ed, right? Top line points, goals, that kind of stuff. The only mention of Benghazi in the email is a question about what's your response to a story by the Independent newspaper in the UK that says we had intelligence 48 hours in advance of the attack that was ignored. Not aware of any actionable intelligence was the answer. And then what does it do? It cuts and pastes the same line from the CIA talking points that, again, was what Ambassador Rice used.
So if it's not about Benghazi, why turn it over in a Benghazi suit? It seems...
you would have to ask State Department about their process for responding to FOIA requests. Again, you can just read it and then decide for yourself. As many people have now said and written, like, this is a conspiracy in theory and search of a conspiracy.
So when a conservative group comes in and says, we want Benghazi documents, the administration says, this is not a Benghazi document, so we're not turning it over, right?
As Nancy Pelosi would say,
Benghazi, Benghazi, Benghazi. Why aren't we talking about something else?
So, so Ed Henry, this is a perfectly logical question, and it's actually a great question. I didn't even think of this. So I give kudos to Ed Henry for thinking of this. Look, the Freedom of Information request that was submitted to you guys was for documents that related to Benghazi, and you gave them this email. You're admitting by turning this over in response to that FOIA request, you are admitting that this email is about Benghazi because you asked us for stuff on Benghazi and we gave you this email. In other words, they were saying by that this is, in fact, about Benghazi. And Ed Henry has to ask him 3 times. And still, Jay Carney wouldn't come up with a straight answer. Now, here is Jake Tapper, number 5. Jake Tapper's with CNN, was with ABC before. Now, this is a guy that occasionally stumbles into honest, decent journalism. Jake Tapper seems like he's got some streak of honesty or integrity in him, and occasionally he will actually do some decent reporting. And he's being probed here by Hugh Hewitt on Hugh Hewitt's radio program. And Hugh Hewitt is saying, look, they're just lying. Jay Carney's just out here lying. And Jake Tapper says, well, here's how I would put it. Let's listen.
They have an interpretation of events that does not fit with what I think happened. But, you know, calling somebody a liar is, that's not normally the kind of language I use. But I think that, you know, the comments that are being made are dissembling, obfuscating, and often, you know, insulting. In
other words, they're lying. And as Nancy Pelosi would say,
Benghazi, Benghazi, Benghazi. Why aren't we talking about something else?
Well, we're not talking about something else because they are lying to us. Now Jake Tapper doesn't want to accuse him of lying, so he uses synonyms like dissemble and obfuscate. I mean, that's just a fancy way of saying they're lying through their eyeballs. Now, Charles Krauthammer, clip 6 and 7, drawing parallels between what's happening right now with Benghazi and what happened about, what would that be, 40 years ago? Clip 6, let's listen.
Look, I think what's really happened here is what Morris says, this email has sort of reopened this in the same way that in Watergate, it was this sort of quiet, private discovery that there were tapes in the White House. It had also died down, and I think Richard Nixon would still be President of the United States today, through hook or by crook, had the tapes not been discovered. And that's what restarted. And this email from the White House, that's what everybody had said. Is there a way to is there any involvement here of the White House, which makes it obviously a political issue, the re-election of the president overriding the truth? And that's why I think it's all reopened. Watching Carney today, I have to say again, they don't pay him enough. On the first question is, if this was a release of information for a request on Benghazi, how can you tell us it isn't about Benghazi? He simply says, I have no idea, ask State Department. But then when you point out the fact that this is the only time, well, it isn't the only, there's one of these rare times when you get a high administration official going on all 5 shows. It happened only once in the Bush administration. It never happened in the Clinton administration. And if they had not been Benghazi, does anybody imagine she would have been on the 5 shows because of a demonstration in Cairo? That's ridiculous. The briefing, the appearance, it was all Benghazi. Of course everything in the memo is about Benghazi, and when Carney denies it, he simply looks foolish.
And as Nancy Pelosi would say,
Benghazi, Benghazi, Benghazi. Why aren't we talking about something else?
Well, they're pretty eager to change the topic, change the subject here. But, you know, Charles Krauthammer said, look, this is kind of like the Watergate tapes. Now, that whole Watergate thing died down, and then that Alex Butterfield, I think was his name, somebody admitted kind of in passing that there was a taping system and that all the conversations in the Oval Office were on tape, sort of like the Sterling guy. And these private conversations in the Oval Office were on tape. And that reawakened the whole thing. When these tapes surfaced, all of a sudden they felt like they had their smoking gun and all that kind of thing. And this email coming to the surface now and not earlier, this email coming to the surface is kind of like the surfacing of those tapes. And Krauthammer's drawing that parallel. This has got sort of a Watergate thing written all over it. Nixon would be president today, or still would have been president, if the tapes hadn't surfaced. And so the implication is this actually could be something that could imperil the presidency of Barack Obama. It rises to that level. Now here is clip number 7, second exchange between Brett Baer, Fox News, and Charles Krauthammer.
I didn't pull the soundbite, but a few weeks ago you said right here on this panel that Republicans should move on, that they should kind of leave Benghazi alone, that it was a dead end. Have you changed your perspective?
Yes, because of the appearance of this memo. It's, to me, equivalent of what was discovered with the Nixon tapes. The point is that Republicans have done a terrible job in building the case. Even today, I have to say, the questioning was disjointed. It was not organized. If they had appointed a special committee long time ago, the way it was done in Watergate, we would have had answers on this and the country wouldn't be tired. But what I did say was the reason it would not go anywhere is because the lack of interest of the other media. And what's changed now, and we saw it in the briefing room, is that I think the other media are somewhat embarrassed by the fact that unlike Fox, they allowed themselves to be stoned and spun and rolled for a year and a half, and now the memo appears, and it's obvious that they missed the story.
And as Nancy Pelosi would say,
Benghazi, Benghazi, Benghazi. Why aren't we talking about something else?
So this is, it's interesting to me. It's going to hinge on what the media does. Now, Krauthammer's pointing out the fact here late in this soundbite that he uses the word embarrassed, that Fox News, CBS tried to get on this with Cheryl Atkinson. She got stonewalled by her own bosses. Why? Because Ben Rhodes, the guy that wrote the smoking gun email, fiction, admitting the whole thing was made up, he's the brother of the president of CBS News. So the older brother is going to cover for the younger brother, whoever's older, whoever's younger there. So that's the reason CBS canned Cheryl Atkinson and the reason why they haven't even touched this thing in 2 days. But Krauthammer said, look, the media is getting a little fed. They've been spun, they've been stoned, they've been rolled. They're used to doing that to other people. They do not like it when people that they have sold their souls for are doing it to them. So it's going to be up to the media. If the media turns on Obama, this could be significant in the same way that Watergate was for Richard Nixon. We will have to wait and see. Again, they're still trying to cover for Hillary. That's going to be a significant offset. Focal Point, After Talk, back after the news.